different ways can you say that they all need to go? How many different examples from how many different levels do you need to keep being sold again and again and again on the same concept? Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Pirates. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you happen to be into football and or hockey, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Penguins that I hope you'll take the time to check out. Cubs 12, Pirates 0. In the hits column, it was Cubs 17, Pirates 0. That's right, a combined no-hitter, because rock bottom just can never be found in the 2024 season. This, of course, was last night at Wrigley Field. Insert all of the usual embarrassing scenarios. Nobody could hit. Everybody was whiffing. The other pitcher had never done anything like this before in his life. Rowdy Tellez was brought on to pitch for a third time in the past 3 weeks alone. And maybe uglier than any of that, Derek Shelton waved a white towel on the no-hitter itself by removing both Brian Reynolds and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa in the bottom of the seventh inning, meaning as defensive replacements. The guys who'd replace them and ultimately hit for them were Alika Williams and Billy McKinney. So what difference does that make? Game was a blowout. Reynolds has played a ton. It's always good to find a way to get him a little bit of a spell, especially with no real break in games here for a long stretch. And yet, we keep coming back to the same subject, don't we? Like, I get that part. I get, especially with Reynolds. Kiner-Falefa's new. I'm not really concerned about him. He had a whole month off. That it's kind of weird taking him out, meaning he missed a month to injury when he was with Toronto before the trade. But where Reynolds is concerned, I'll repeat, there's logic to that. But what never, ever gets prioritized is the embarrassment factor. And yes, I understand that for there to be embarrassment, the people who should be experiencing embarrassment need to feel embarrassed, and they don't. So when they walk out of the friendly confines last night to get to the bus, to get to the charter, to the people running the team, both at field level and in the front office, it's just a loss. It's just another loss. It's not at all something where there should be some associated shame. The Pirates have now been no-hit 3 times under this administration. If you've been following this franchise long enough, you'll know that there was a time where it was a real point of pride, underscoring the word pride, that the Pirates had the longest streak in all of Major League Baseball for not being no-hit. Bob Gibson did it to them in 1970 at Three River Stadium, and then nearly half a century went by till it happened again. And that stood through a whole lot of losing. Why is that? Because, most players don't like to get no-hit. Most managers don't like to get no-hit. Most general managers don't like to get no-hit. And this is why, if I can sidetrack here for a second, I loved what Jose Tabata did to Max Scherzer. I loved it. I'm referring, of course, to several years ago in Washington when Scherzer almost had the Pirates set down in a masterpiece and Tabata stuck his left elbow out. The umpire didn't call it. Tabata went and took his base. There were no apologies either. The Pirates were still within striking distance. And as Jose would say afterward, we needed base runners. I got on base. I have a personal quirk about no-hitters that I feel like I ought to confess here. I really don't like them. Maybe it's because I've always been, and this is since childhood, a much, much bigger fan of hitting than pitching. And I just can't stand seeing 27 up, 27 down, or even just no hits. To me, it's just an abomination of the game. It's not supposed to be like that. Now, if it's a pitcher who's just unbelievably unbeatable and he's bringing it and he's carrying the game, yeah, that can be entertaining. But that's not what this was last night, and that's not what most no-hitters are. Most often, it's just what the term would suggest, which is that the team that was at the plate couldn't hit. As in, there were no hitters. And that lack of competitive spirit, that fire, that come and follow me into battle, that's not there with Shelton. That's not there with Cherington. That's not there all the way up to the owner. And what in heck are you supposed to do about that? When we come back, J1Q. This portion of Daily Shot of Pirates is brought to you by our friends at North Shore Tavern, that's directly across Federal Street from PNC Park. It's home of Steak on a Stone, an eating experience, underscoring the word experience. The steak is brought to you partially cooked on an 800-degree stone, and you do the rest. It's a ton of fun, it's a great meal, and it's a baseball atmosphere like no other in Pittsburgh. North Shore Tavern, right across Federal Street from PNC Park.
It's Gun Storage Check Week. Help prevent unwanted access to your firearms. No one wants their unsecured gun to be used in an accident, a suicide, or a crime. Use lockboxes, safes, and locks to secure your firearms. Learn more at gunstoragechek.org. That's gunstoragechek.org. Brought to you by NSSF, the Firearm Industry Trade Association.
Today's J1Q comes from JK, who says, DK, here's one for you. Why has no one at the big league level been fired yet? Here's what I'm going to do from now on. JK, this is for you and this is for everybody else who actually has any question in any form, whether it's the J1Q or whatever, is to just copy and paste the same answer, because it really does come down to they're not competitive people. They're not naturally competitive people. I began pointing this out quite some time ago. And when I did so, I vividly remember one individual who both reads and listens to my coverage saying, "Do you hear what you're saying? Do you hear how stupid that sounds?" And yes, that was intended as a criticism of me as opposed to one of them. The criticism suggesting that I was being over the top, because it does sound over the top, doesn't it? People in sports who aren't competitive. But I've clarified along the way and repeatedly of late that they're competitive, and intensely so when it comes to perfecting this process that they have. They love the process. They love the means and don't really worry much about the ends. And insanely enough, that's mirrored between the two phases, meaning the front office part and the field level part. As long as everyone's keeping the process humming, then everyone's fine. You actually hear Cherington hint at that occasionally in some of his interviews. For example, earlier this year in defending Andy Haynes, and there's really no other way to have a conversation about Haynes other than to either, attack or defend. He'd say, nobody gets to see the hard work that happens behind the scenes and all the hours that these guys put in. I'm thinking, who cares? You're probably thinking the same thing. I mean, that's just assumed. They're coaches and instructors, and in the case of the front office, scouts and analytics specialists and everything else who've made it to one of the 30 teams at the highest level of the game. Why would anyone applaud that they're trying really hard? But that's it. That's the issue. That's the root of all these problems. It's not the only problem. They also can't scout / develop / acquire / a whole bunch of other stuff. But a night like last night, to me, should serve as Exhibit A. You just stood there at Wrigley in a division rival, and I know the Pirates don't have any rivals, but okay, another divisional opponent in their stadium, and you got no hit by 3 whoever's. And, you left there thinking, whatever. I saved the bullpen an inning by putting Rowdy out there again. Score doesn't matter. The outcome doesn't matter. And there is no embarrassment factor. No hits, no shame. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Pirates. You're absolutely nuts for doing so. But we're going to be back with another one of these tomorrow.